These were the scenes from Kabul, Afghanistan's capital, 5 years ago. After fighting a 20-year insurgency, the Taliban walked back into the presidential palace. The previous Western-backed Afghan government collapsed almost overnight. At that time, most foreign governments refused to recognize the Taliban government, and many predicted it wouldn't survive for long. But 5 years later, the Taliban are still in power.
They are determined to stay, one thing which says a lot for their strength, and the opponents, one, they are not united, second, they are not accredited.
Yet Afghanistan remains anything but stable. There are tensions with neighboring countries, mainly with Pakistan. Border closures, trade disruptions, and refugee expulsions have strained relations. Inside Afghanistan, the Taliban struggle to contain attacks from various militant groups. At the same time, millions of Afghans still depend on aid. Girls and women remain barred from secondary and higher education, and many young people continue to leave the country.
Stability is not only the security, but also economic opportunity, functioning institutions, and also protection of rights.
Despite the challenges, the Taliban have succeeded in doing what few thought possible, staying in power. What does this mean for the future of Afghanistan and the region? This is Kandahar, about 500 kilometers south of Kabul. Kabul is the administrative capital, but Kandahar is where many of the Taliban's key decisions are believed to be made. This is where the Taliban first emerged in the mid-1990s, and it is the home of their supreme leader, Haibatullah Akhundzada. He's rarely seen in public and governs largely through religious decrees.
Supreme leader with a small group of his close friends or advisor to him, they are the main decision maker.
Shinkai Karokhel is a former Afghan ambassador to Canada and a human rights activist.
And they really strengthening or centralized authority in Kabul, but itself, this kind of power reduced the autonomy of Kabul ministerial cabinet.
That makes Kandahar more than just a city. It has become the ideological center of Afghanistan. But how did a movement born here end up controlling an entire country? The Taliban first came to power in 1996.
Taliban that were in power before came back when the republic expired, came back to their seat.
Muhammad Umar Daudzai served as a former Minister of Interior of Afghanistan and Afghan ambassador to Pakistan.
Kandahar was the center of power. Mullah Umar was sitting in Kandahar, ruling the country from Kandahar. That's the philosophy, that there is unspoken strategy.
Today, the Taliban run ministries, control borders, collect taxes, and sign mining deals. They have banned opium cultivation and expanded mining to boost revenue. But control does not mean the country is free from threats. While armed anti-Taliban groups like the National Resistance Front operate in northern provinces, the most lethal and pressing internal threat comes from Islamic State Khorasan. Also known as ISIS-K, it is an extremist group affiliated with the Islamic State. ISIS-K regularly carries out deadly attacks, forcing the Taliban to expand intelligence and counter-terrorism operations. To understand how the Taliban govern Afghanistan today, we must go back nearly 5 decades. In 1979, the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan to prop up a struggling communist government. What followed was a nearly 10-year war against the Mujahideen, an alliance of Islamist resistant groups backed by the US, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and others. When Soviet troops withdrew in 1989, the war didn't end. The Mujahideen factions that had fought side by side turned on each other.
Taliban emerged first in 1994 as a reaction to the infighting between Mujahideen groups. Mujahideen, we mean those who fought against the Soviet Union. And that fighting had pushed the country into deep crisis and chaos. And Taliban emerged there. They wiped them out. They took almost 90 to 95% of the Afghan soil.
Within 2 years, the Taliban had captured the Afghan capital Kabul. Their first stint in power lasted until 2001. After 9/11, Washington identified Osama bin Laden as the mastermind behind the terrorist attacks in the US in 2001.
There were many flaws in their policies, one of which was mingling with Al-Qaeda, sheltering Al-Qaeda, and operationally sharing seat with Al-Qaeda. And then Al-Qaeda attacked the United States.
Washington accused the Taliban of sheltering the leader of the terrorist group Al-Qaeda. When the Taliban refused to hand bin Laden over, the US military invaded Afghanistan, but Osama bin Laden escaped. In 2011, US troops killed Osama bin Laden in Pakistan. Back in December 2001, the Taliban regime collapsed following the US invasion. US-led NATO forces took control of Afghanistan alongside a new interim government formed largely by local warlords who had fought the Taliban. But the Taliban didn't disappear. They regrouped, launching a 2-decade insurgency against foreign and Afghan forces. The then Afghan government long accused Pakistan of providing sanctuary to Taliban leaders. Islamabad denies this allegation.
Taliban mostly took shelter in Pakistan. And later into Iran also. And from these two countries, they started struggling against the United States and allies, and also the Afghan government.
Then came February 2020. After years of bloody attacks, the United States signed a peace accord with the Taliban in the Qatari capital of Doha. The following year, American troops withdrew and the Afghan security forces quickly collapsed. Within days, then President Ashraf Ghani fled the country. The Taliban entered Kabul for the second time. Today, Afghanistan's economy still depends on aid. Millions struggle with food and healthcare, while funding cuts have crippled basic services. The Taliban government says it has increased revenue, reduced corruption, and invested in infrastructure projects.
The government revenues were accounted for only 7 to 8% of the GDP.
Anwarul Haq Ahadi is a politician who served as the Afghan Minister of Commerce and Industry in the previous government.
But as I understand now, Taliban's government's revenue account for 13 to 14% of the GDP. Well, now the Taliban have been able to raise taxes, raise revenues.
Then there is the issue that has defined the Taliban's rule more than any other: human rights, especially those of girls and women. Afghanistan remains the only country in the world where girls are banned from education beyond 6th grade. Women are also excluded from much of public life.
It's really incredible that in 21st century, Afghanistan is the only country that prohibits girls from going to school. And I think for the Taliban, if they were to allow girls to go to school and women to work, I think probably 50% of their problem with the international community would be solved.
Well, exclusion of women and girls from education and many profession, I think it will have a very severe consequences for Afghanistan. Because especially for the long term, It reduced the country's human capital limit, economic growth.
Meanwhile, millions of returning refugees are putting further pressure on an already fragile economy, while many educated professionals continue to leave. 5 years on, the Taliban still lack what they want most: international recognition. Most countries do not recognize the regime officially. Afghanistan's seat at the United Nations is still held by the representative of the former republic. Yet the Taliban are no longer isolated. More and more countries are engaging with them. But some relationships, like the one with neighboring Pakistan, remain extremely strained. Pakistan accuses the Taliban of harboring the TTP, the militant group Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan. The Taliban deny it, but the dispute has escalated into border clashes and refugee expulsions. The tensions are further complicated by the Durand Line that divides Pakistan and Afghanistan. The colonial-era border has long been disputed because, among other reasons, it splits the Pashtun ethnic community into two nations.
Pakistan expected Taliban to follow pretty much Pakistan's line, not only just regarding TTP, but in regional politics as well. Well, Afghanistan is an independent country. I mean, Taliban might have friendly attitudes towards Pakistan or had friendly attitudes toward Pakistan, but it does not mean that Afghanistan will necessarily follow in every respect Pakistan's line. So that's where the problem is.
Pakistan is not the only state with strategic interests in Afghanistan. China, Iran, India, Russia, and Central Asian states have expanded engagement with Kabul.
But these days, apparently relations between Amarat and the Islamic Republic of Iran are not that bad.
They are at the stage of war with Pakistan, and they are very friendly with India, which is surprising to everybody. And then also they have built relationship with Central Asia and Russia. And Russia remains the only country officially recognizing the Taliban.
Even the US and European countries are engaging with the Taliban on aid, migration, and counter-terrorism. So, what does the future hold? 5 years on, the Taliban have survived, consolidated power, and expanded regional ties. But Afghanistan still struggles with deep poverty, heavy reliance on humanitarian aid, and millions of returning refugees. And the biggest obstacle to international legitimacy remains unchanged. The Taliban continue to ban girls from secondary schools and universities, severely restrict women's rights, and silence political opposition. For many governments, that remains a red line.
And of course, civilian rights restriction is one of the major issues for international.
Good governance leads to good economy, a stronger economy, and stronger economy helps the stability and legitimacy of the government.
The Taliban have gained power. They have gained international engagement. But for many Afghans, a stable future remains out of reach for now.